All right, on this one, what do you think? I mean, no new construction. This is like a watershed.
I'm into that
type of thing in in residential and commercial services.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's like grass is always greener. Episode of Acquisitions Anonymous.
Hello, another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous.
We don't have 100% beard anymore.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous. I'm joined today by John Wilson from Owned and Operated Podcast and also Wilson Co. We talk about a really interesting Axial deal, a plumbing and HVAC business in the Northeast. It's around $4.5 million in revenue, 1.4 million in EBITDA. And it checks like so many of the hot boxes right now in this space. It's no new construction, all residential, and almost all recurring services with a little bit of a niche with like boilers. Super interesting, in-depth episode. We talk about the metrics that they've given us in the teaser, what matters, what doesn't, depends on the buyer type, but we talk about just the dynamics of this industry as a whole. John is a really, really deep expertise operator in the space, has done multiple acquisitions. It's a really in-depth episode. If you're looking at something plumbing or HVAC related, this is like a must listen. Hope you enjoy the episode and stick around for a quick word from our sponsor.
This episode of Acquisitions Anonymous is sponsored by Acquisition Lab. Acquisition Lab and their team, they've been longtime supporters of the pod, and they provide a really great service for people who are looking to acquire a business. So it's created by Walker Dybel, who's become a friend, the author of Buy Then Build, How to Outsmart the Startup Game. So Acquisition Lab's an accelerator with a highly vetted, cohort-based educational and support community for people who are serious about buying a business. So a lot of our listeners like you tune in every week to our deal reviews. You want to get in on buying a business. You're on this podcast because you're trying to learn how to buy a business. But if you're not quite sure where to start, Acquisition Lab is a great place to start. So they exist to help people buy a business and to navigate all those complexities of the process, everything you hear us talking about on the show. They provide a proven framework, tools, and resources that support you all the way from search to close. They do it. There's a whole bunch of educational material and support. So if you're serious about buying a business, check out acquisitionlab.com, or you can actually email the program director, Chelsea Wood, directly. Her email is chelsea@buythenbuild.com.
John, what's up, man?
Glad to be back, talking deals, talking plumbing.
I love that you're back, and it's just me and you. When everybody heard that John Wilson was coming on the podcast, they ran for the hills because they want to hear this fresh live recording where you explain what's up with plumbing and electrical and HVAC.
This is just it's too much wisdom to handle, really live. Like you have to be able to pause it, soak it in. No, I totally get it. Totally. My wife tells me the same thing.
My kids are like, hey, we want to listen to the podcast. And I'm like, it will put you to sleep. Okay. Yeah. So that's totally fine.
And for our show, like my wife listens to every episode and I'm like, that's a lot of support. Like you have to listen to me talk a lot and you choose to listen to me in this case. Like that's kind of amazing.
To this. This is extra credit.
Wow.
That is amazing. My wife does not do that. So I'm going to let her know she's like really dropping the ball.
Yeah. She's behind, man.
All right. Well, I got a deal for us. And we said this right before we hit record, but you are our most active guest. You're our most repeat guest. And so thanks for, staying ahead of the curve and keeping it going. But we pretty much always talk about something in your circle of competence. And we got another one today that is from Axial. It's a 1.3 million EBITDA residential plumbing and HVAC business. So it says this is a residential plumbing and HVAC business. They've established a strong reputation and substantial customer base with more than 2,500 active accounts. The average customer spend exceeds $1,500, demonstrating the company's ability to generate significant value per client. They say the key attributes of the business are they have a balanced revenue stream. They generate approximately 60% of their revenue from hydronic heat and plumbing services. That's like boilers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With the remaining 40% coming from HVAC services. They have a service focus. It's exclusively repair and replacement work with no involvement in new construction. Can't wait to talk about that. Recurring revenue, a significant portion of their revenue is derived from on-demand services, maintenance contracts, and repeat customer work, ensuring a stable and predictable income stream. They boast a loyal team of 23 skilled professionals. Many of them have long tenure with the company. They say that the investment highlights are that you could expand geographically, excellent opportunity for a buyer seeking to enter or expand into an attractive Northeast market. recurring revenue. They've talked about customer integration. They're kind of saying, hey, if you have some other business, you could actively just tap into this 2,500 customer list. Revenue in 2022 was $4 million top line. EBITDA 1.1 million, so 27.5% EBITDA margin. Then in 2023, they grew by about 12.5% to 4.5 million in revenue and 1.4 million in EBITDA. Margins are at 33.1%. And they're looking for outright sale, change of control, and that it's located in the Northeast US. They, I think, probably specifically didn't tell us where it is, but Northeast US. There's a little bit to go on here. What do you think, John?
I mean, there's a few data points that I'm just interested in. So, like in that first two sentences, we talk about 2,500 active accounts, and we talk about 1,500 average spend per client. My first couple questions are like, what time period are we measuring active by, and what time is like LTV 1,500, or is that like trailing 12 or something like that?
Yeah. So when somebody says something like this, like 2,500 active accounts could be, we have 2,500 total historical customers since the origination of the business.
Right. Or it could that would be small. So 2,500. Yeah, that's a pretty small, that's pretty small. So the fact that they're driving $4 million out of 2,500, that feels like I'm kind of impressed. I feel like we missed something here with the average spend at $1,500. I wonder if they mean 15,000.
Or I wonder if, because it's repair work, I'm wondering if it's like their average order value, not their like lifetime value of the customer or annual, annual average spend of the customer. I'm thinking that might be,
that could be. I think they've got a Yeah. Well, I divided 4.5 million by 2,500 active accounts, and it says 1,800.
Yeah.
But yeah, so usually active accounts in my industry is we touch that house in the last 3 years.
Okay. So last 36 months,
right,
deems it kind of active.
Right. 18 months for HVAC. It's a little bit different by trade because you just don't need a plumber more than once every 2-3 years. But with HVAC, you probably need an HVAC guy once or twice a year, tune up your furnace, tune up your air conditioning. So active can mean a lot of different things. I do wonder how many are inactive. Total customer accounts is kind of an interesting, that's something that we started to get a ton of value on later as we just improved our tech stack of how do we communicate with these customers. So it used to be, we would have bought this business and we would have done a really poor job. We maybe send one letter like, hey, we own them now. And, but there's enough tech out there now that you can do some really interesting stuff. Like that $2,500 can turn into, or 2,500 customers can turn into a really substantial new lead source, and you can activate them more frequently.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of into 2,500. It's a small amount, but I'm into it. I have a friend in Chicago who bought a company with, I think, 4,000 or 5,000 active accounts. And that company went from 6 million to like 18 in like 24 months.
Wow.
And a big focus of that was reactivating those active accounts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's some value there. I'm surprised by how young that is, but the company, they didn't talk about tenure of the company. So it could also be a new company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like maybe it's 2 years old.
What do you think about this, the idea, and I know you have strong opinions on it, of being a multi-trade business at 4 million in revenue?
Yeah. I mean, it's a bad idea. Yeah. I was talking with, we had Aaron Gaynor from Eco Plumbers on our show yesterday. And Aaron he's $75 million, the south side of Ohio. So Columbus and Dayton and Cincinnati, and their core branch is like 55 million in Columbus. And he ignored the conventions and stayed pure plumbing up until like $30 million, like kind of late compared to what you see for the most part. But he was probably right. like that's probably the right decision, because then they became this best in class plumbing company. They accelerated their growth, and each of these trades is like totally different businesses. Like we're a 3-trade business, and it is complicated and messy. And we're mid-20s, and I think like I have friends that are our same size but pure HVAC or pure plumbing, and their businesses are just better than mine. Like they just are. Like way more focused, way higher margin, way better cash flow. They're just so much more dialed into the one thing than we are, just because that's all they can think about.
This seems really, really small to try and do both. But, if you've got, I think the hardest part, right, is the skilled technical labor. And so if you've got 23 employees and you got, 15 of them in plumbing and you got 8 of them in HVAC, I mean, if you buy something like this, it's not like you're going to get rid of, 40% of the revenue of a business that's this small. So I see how people get into it, right? Like, their phone's ringing. They're thinking, how can we capture more of this? They maybe find a key employee who jump starts it or something like that. And next thing you know, you're trying to be all things to all people.
Yeah. I think my own lived experience and then just watching what other people do is there's these different plateaus in your business and you don't know how to do what's next.
Yeah.
So like you'll sit there and maybe you're $2 million or $3 million or $20 million. Like it can happen at any point really. And you're just looking for like, what is the next step change in order to put us over the hump?
Yeah.
And usually we choose wrong. Like I've chosen wrong a ton of times where like, hey, the next step change, like I'll talk to, and I said this myself 5 years ago, but at one point, I thought that that I had capped the potential of my market, and I was like a $3 million business, and I was like, I don't think I can grow anymore here. And I'm like, 3,000 or 10,000% growth later, I'm like, well, that was stupid. And I talked to these guys, and they're like, they're doing $1 million or $2 million, and they're like, I think we got to open a new market. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like you haven't even started yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I see that's how usually guys end up in these multi-trade things is they just don't know what's next. And launching HVAC looks easy because it kind of is. Like once we know the steps to something, it looks easy. So if I've taken a company from 1 million to 5, I know the steps. Yeah. So if I want to go launch a new location, in my brain, I'm like, well, I know how to take a company from 1 to 5. That's actually kind of easy. I know exactly how to do this, and I'll go do this and whatever, ignoring all the actual difficulties of running 2 markets. Yeah. So I think that's how guys usually end up in it. They're looking for this sort of like easy button for a step change instead of doubling down on their one thing.
Yeah, and on those core processes.
Yeah. And I suspect that's what happened here.
What do you make of the Northeast geography? It's
an interesting geography.
And it really like boiler. We don't have that many residential boilers.
Yeah.
Down here in the Carolinas, but obviously this is like a huge installed base.
Yep.
Geographically and aging equipment. So like I like that, but what do you make of the geography and the kind of if most of their work it doesn't seem like they're doing like they don't mention like drain cleaning, right? They don't mention like some core kind of potential attributes. Like if their specialty is boilers and like steam pipe, pressurized pipe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, could be. That section of the states is kind of interesting. I think in general, it's a good place to be. Like Northeast is kind of an interesting market. Obviously you have like a lot of different potential cities, and the difference of being in Boston versus being in like, rural New Hampshire are going to be different, different TAMs. But from what I've seen of just like friends in those markets, the average ticket's way higher. Average household income is way higher. Their average system is more expensive. So from outside looking in, it's a good place to be. And boilers are expensive. Like average boiler ticket might be 15 to 17,000. Whereas if that was HVAC, that might be like 9 to 11.
Yeah.
So
versus
it's
a tank hot water heater that might be 3,000
Right.
or something, right?
Right. So it's a good market to be in. Now, I think that it's a good market to be in on the consumer side. A lot of the Northeast is still heavy union. So like it's very different being in Boston than being in Ohio. You know, there's not really any unions in Ohio.
Do you think that this doesn't mention it because it's not union, or do you think it doesn't mention it so it doesn't scare people away?
I could see it going either way.
Yeah,
I could see it going either way. Yeah, union. Are you guys union?
No, there's no unions in South Carolina.
Yeah. There's some unions in Cleveland, but it's like very large hospitals. Let's build a hospital, or I don't even know.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. I know people who are in our trade in roofing who are union shops, and I mean, if you're in a geography where it matters, I mean, you just figure out how to live with it and work with it. I will say that the cost, like I compared notes with somebody, my kind of revenue, what I plug in for takeoffs, what our estimators plug in for takeoffs on these larger commercial re-roof and new construction for an 8-man crew per day is like 1/10 of what the union guys plug in for just the cost per crew per day. It's just astronomically higher.
That's fascinating. Yeah, we don't really compete against it at all. Like we have, because we just don't touch commercial, and it's almost always like very big new commercial construction, which I would say doesn't really happen around where I am anyways. Like we're not in like a building heavy area. And there's a couple really big outfits that are all union, like 200 million commercial contractors, and they'll work from the Carolinas to, God knows where, but they drive out, they run out of Ohio, Canton. Or we'll run into like a bunch of track homes. So they'll do that type of thing, but no one's really touching residential service. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in Boston, that it's a thing. Residential service is unionized, which is weird.
Would you like this business more if it was suburban, or if it was like a real dense city center? Like, what's your preference? I
don't personally know how to compete in a super dense city. So it's hard for me to give like an opinion on that. Like I would like if it was $4 million and we're in like a burb of DC, I'd be all up on that. That would be cool. Trying to think of some other cities. But if it's like a really dense urban environment and like these trucks are not moving, I'm thinking it's not really, I guess it could benefit from the route dynamics and route optimization and things like that for this kind of routine service work. But you're just saying that's a totally different business in terms of the dynamics of how to run it. I feel like that's a different business. And maybe I'm just not thinking about it. I actually don't really know. I could probably send out something on LinkedIn and just find out, but I don't actually know anybody that runs like a downtown New York City. Yeah. Obviously somebody's doing it. A lot of people are doing it. They're doing it, but they're probably making so much money hand over fist that they just shut their mouths and they don't talk about it. Yeah. Well, I mean, you would have to, like, their billable would have to be 2 or 3 times mine in order to cover the traffic, or like, hey, we can do 4 jobs a day. Maybe they can only do 2, even just being in a tighter area. I mean, or like, how do you keep stock? Or like the problems are so different. Yeah. Well, you got to think too, if you're doing residential plumbing in the suburbs, it's one house on one parcel, and it's probably got a crawl space or a slab. Like it's a very different dynamic. I went into a building yesterday. We're looking at the re-roof. It's 17 stories tall. Yeah. And like the job is so small in terms of the square footage of roofing, but the logistics is like 90% of the job. We got to have a $25,000 a month crane. Totally. And in that scenario, like really it sort of breaks the stereotype of a residential plumber, because like, you're doing a selling process with the homeowner, but you're in a commercial building. Like that's a commercial building. You might have a 6-inch main. You've got pumps everywhere doing stuff. And that's a totally different plumbing environment. Yeah. Now, granted, if that's what you're used to and trained in, then okay. But what do you think about? I would say suburban, just because that's what I know, and I feel comfortable with that.
Is that if like you have a first time buyer looking at this, do you think Suburban is the kind of path of least resistance for new buyers? I mean, there's more of them. So
yeah, I would say so. Like path least resistance, and frankly, everyone else in the world, like how many cities have the problems that we just described? 10. So the other, 4,000 cities that all have, peers to talk to don't have those problems. So as far as like, the bigger you get, the more you rely on peers. This is a conversation that Rich and I have kind of often. You sort of go through these like stages as you grow your business. And the first stage is like, okay, I'm going to have friends that are business owners. Doesn't matter what business. And then it's sort of like the business tastes like chicken. And that's like the EOS and like the, we're going to do culture index and like, okay, business tastes like chicken. This stuff has to happen regardless. And then the bigger you get, the more you start to rely on industry peers or industry betters to like drive the next stage, because you don't need generic answers. You need specific answers to your specific problems.
Yeah. How did you navigate this thing that's very nuanced?
Yeah, this exact problem, someone has this answer.
Yeah.
So there's just, from my perspective, there's more people that have the answer in a Suburban residential service company.
Rich and I actually talked yesterday, and we talked about this. Like, I've really dialed back from just kind of like the general like Twitter SMB conference, kind of world. And I'm spending a lot more time on industry association things where I can rub shoulders with people who are further down the path and like see around the corner a little bit.
It's the same thing for Rich and myself. I basically haven't been able to engage in any, because if I'm going to go to 1 or 2 conferences a year, like they have to move the needle for the business. So it has to be the things that will answer my very specific problems.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think Suburban's probably more friendly just because there's so many more of those service providers out there that you can get answers from.
Hey, Michael here. I want to let you know that I'm hosting a conference, first time I've ever done it, and it's called Holdco Conference 2025. If you want to learn how to manage multiple businesses at once, how to incubate new companies, or how other Holdco owners and operators run their fleet of companies, then you should come to Utah next spring. We've got a ton of great speakers, including Walker Deibel, who wrote Buy Then Build and founded Acquisition Lab. Plus, we're hosting it at an all-inclusive mountain resort so you can hit the slopes at the end of the day. So please go to holdcoconference.com for your tickets and get 10% off with your discount AAPod. That's holdcoconference.com and use code AAPOD for 10% off. Now, back to the show.
All right. On this one, what do you think? I mean, no new construction. This is like a watershed.
I'm into that
type of thing in, in residential and commercial services.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's like grass is always greener, right? Like there's this dynamic where you either do or you don't. And we do tons of new construction on the commercial side. Yeah. I don't really know people who make it work on the residential services, new construction with very sustainable margins. But I look at this as a huge plus for this business.
I mean, it is. Like not having new construction exposure is good. Like it ups the value. Chris Hoffman has done a couple posts on this, which I think is like generally helpful. But like the apex value of our industry is residential service, under 10% commercial exposure, no new construction, good tech stack. Like that's it. What do your Google reviews look like? Are you on, if not ServiceTitan, are you on one of the 2 or 3 other, top CRMs that they would know how to handle your data? And then, what's the exposure to anything non-service? So that's like top of value. And if you have, and that all being said, I'm still totally blown away by how many, not even from like a value, but I just don't see how people don't get it. And I'll talk to peers in the industry. I'll go to these conferences or these workshops or whatever. And I'm like, we've got a $10 million business over here that's got 5 of it is new construction. And I'm just like, what? Like, it's 2024. Like, we all know better than this. Like, I don't know.
So counterpoint to that, and this is a different trade, but My business, we do 100% commercial. We do probably 50% new construction.
Yeah.
And I get it on the residential services side, because residential new construction is either super high margin, really high end, low volume, or it is very high volume, low margin track home.
Yeah.
And it's hard, I think, to get either of those very large. And there's two different customer experiences, two different customer types, probably two different tech types, right? If you're doing track home, new construction plumbing, that's very different than the crew that you would send to a really, really high end home to install like a, $25,000 shower or something.
Yeah.
But our business, the thing that I like about new construction for us is that we are capturing a lot of margin in a very short amount of time. Our average order value is probably $350,000. And we're in essence taking 20 years worth of activity, and a roof it's a 20-year product plus or minus. So we're capturing like 20 years worth of margin in, a 4 to 6 month period.
I think in your industry, it makes total sense. I don't know that I have any like big thing against new construction as a thing itself. I have an issue when I see it inside like this business. So if this business had it, I'll walk through how new construction happens in the residential service side, because I think that might help. So guy launches company. Me, John. I go and launch a plumbing company, and I need food. I call my friends, I call my family, I'm on Facebook, hey, I can replace your toilet or whatever. And you need work. So guys get into new construction because it sort of falls in their lap, and they end up doing this contract, and I put together a Huntington, or I did a gas station or whatever. And it kept me busy for 3 weeks. And so normally it's a stability of the owner's home life that gets these owners into new construction and doing projects that they just shouldn't. Because the reality is, like, if they would have taken that same amount of time instead of laying pipe in a Huntington, they could have gone door to door, or they could have figured out how to market. They could have done anything. But it's almost always a lead flow problem. Like, they just don't know how to drive leads. So then they end up with new construction. It's not well thought out. It's not like, hey, let's approach this contractor. Hey, let's do this. It's like, I'm doing this in order to feed my family. Then it usually grows as the rest of the business grows. But the way you can win in new construction. Like, there's companies so much larger than me, it's ridiculous, in residential new construction, and they beat me all day long. But like, that's all they do. Like, that's their core business. Instead of what I usually see is like the $2 or $3 million business or the $10 million business that, like, they really just need to focus, because those are two totally different things. Yeah. But I had Matt Ballard on our show a couple weeks ago, and he's amazing. Like $55-60 million, nearly all new construction HVAC business out in Vegas. Absolutely monstrous. Like, he's a machine. And he's killing it. Like, that's great. I have no stones to throw at that. Yeah. I just, it's the same thing that we talked about. Like, hey, I feel like it's early for you to be in plumbing and HVAC. Like, what are you talking about here? And it's the same thing with new construction and service. Like, those are two totally different things. If you can approach it and like master it and be amazing at it, like, rock on, man. But usually the guys that I see, they're not. They got into it in a state of desperation. They hang on to it because they're scared of fear. Down season or it's almost always like, keeps us busy in the winter. And they're like, well, you should learn how to market. Like, that's, that's really the answer that you're looking for, but you're just not doing it.
What do you think, John, about these margins? Are they real and are they sustainable?
Real, maybe. Sustainable, no.
Because if you grow this business at all, you have to actually start figuring out real customer acquisition, and that costs something.
Yeah. I mean, if I talk to this owner, they would probably tell me they don't market. Like, we don't market. We just told them we do HVAC. So now we're really complicated, but we don't market. And then, $5 million is when you have to add some more infrastructure. Usually, that 20 to 30 guys, which I think they said 23 somewhere in there. Yeah, that's a lot. My bet is they either don't have a service manager or the owner is the service manager in order to achieve those margins. So, eventually you have to add a manager if you're going to keep going. 20 some guys is quite a bit. I'm sure the office looks pretty stripped down, like 1 or 2 people on the phones. So, is it real? Like maybe, could be. I don't look at that and I'm like, dude, no way. It could do it. It would just be really hard to replicate.
Yeah, you're not going to maintain 33% margins doubling this business.
No, there's no way. I mean, if we walk through the decisions that got them there, I'm assuming there's maybe one service manager, maybe. Probably no install manager, and the owner's going to be carrying a lot of those hats. 2 people in the office picking up the phone, maybe a third one part-time. They're doing dispatch. No real marketing. That's why they launched the other trade, is because they couldn't figure out lead flow in the first one. So they're just these people are calling. I don't know what to do. Let's offer this and keep growing. They haven't made the reinvestments that you need to go to the next stage.
I think you've talked about this some on Twitter, but what does this business sell for, and what is it realistically actually probably worth?
Depends on the buyer, obviously.
Because is this business let's say this business is 1 market away from you, it's an adjacent market. Yeah, is it of any value to you?
Yeah, I'm looking at a deal that looks ish like this, a little bit more revenue and less EBITDA. And it's worth something to me, but most of my value in it is it's exactly that. They're 20 minutes away, and I would prefer to not have a competitor buy it.
Yeah.
So that's okay, we'll cut a check, but
this is right in the sweet spot though of ETA and independent sponsor buying this and owning and operating the business. From an EBITDA standpoint, it's in the sweet spot. It probably can get done with SBA 7A is my impression. But I mean, what are people paying for this right now?
Dude, all over the map. So I'll talk to guys that on this business, and I haven't seen this exact one, but I saw one pretty close the other day, and it was $3.5 million of revenue and 1 or 700, somewhere between there, of earnings. And they're I think we got to come in at 6 times. And I'm what the fuck are you talking about? It's just kind of wild. I think people are still in this very aggressive mindset on some of this stuff. And personally, I don't think it's necessary. Now, granted, I haven't been in the buying market, but this one that we're working on, ours was a 3.5, and it was a decent size. And if it goes above that, I'm good. I'm going to tap out. I think, especially in a case like this where the margins are just not repeatable, I think let's get to what the number is actually going to be moving forward. And usually I like to pay half of revenue is a good number. That if the sale price goes above that, I'm tapping out. And if you're paying more than a 1 times of revenue for a company this small in plumbing HVAC, I think you lost the plot.
Yeah.
And the reality is, and this might sound jerky, but you could rebuild this business in 2 years for a hell of a lot less than $5 million or whatever else they're trying to get.
I think that's the whole dynamic right now that I've seen you key in on is why buy this when you could build it? But there's a much more kind of well-trod path on buying, and getting that jump start and having kind of a critical mass. But I think
it depends on the circles. I really I'm going to take us back to what circle are you in? If you're in an industry circle and you told people you were going to pay a 1 times revenue for this business, which would only be a 3 times multiple, from what I'm looking at here.
Yeah.
If you said that to a group of people that used to work at Bain, they'd be yeah, it makes total sense. 3 times multiple. Yeah. If you told that to another guy in the industry, he'd be what the fuck are you talking about? You could literally rebuild this in a year or 2. So why would you pay, $4.5 million or $6 million because you had to pay it for 4 times? It just doesn't make any sense. So I really think it's what circle are you in And maybe the bigger lesson there is like, hey, if you're looking at an industry, there's a ton of Facebook groups where people just really openly share, and they're going to be your peers if you buy into that industry. And maybe you should just dig in there and just talk to people, get a better idea of like, hey, does this make sense? Does a $6 million purchase price, which is a 4 times, which would not be a crazy purchase price.
Yeah.
Like it would be crazy, but like wouldn't be a harsh multiple. Yeah. Yeah. It's 4 times. Like I would just stupid check that with some peers in the industry. But we're still seeing, like I got an email yesterday, some guy, it's like a $2 or $3 million revenue business. And he's like, I think I'm going to pay 5 for this. And I'm like, dude, you cannot pay $5 million for this business. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I get it. I get that it's $1 million of EBITDA. I get it. And I get that like whatever school you went to told you that 5 times is good, but like,
yeah, it pencils.
Dude, you got to stupid check this. Yeah. You got to, this is dumb. This is a really bad decision. So yeah, guys are still doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting kind of dynamic when, that whole, if you're at the table and you don't know who the patsy is, like you're the patsy, I think, and like our tables are always kind of changing, in terms of your opportunity cost and the way that you look at deals. There's deals that you probably would have done 5 years ago that now you wouldn't touch.
Yeah.
And probably things that you really like now that in 5 years you would say that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, my tolerance for, I realized this the other day. I encourage people to buy small. I continue to do that because I think that that's a good thing. But like my tolerance, I was looking at a deal and someone was like, hey, do you want to participate in this in like a meaningful way? Not like a equity, but like, do you want to like, be on the board or whatever? And I was just like, no, like I have zero desire to have $5 million revenue problems. Like I am good on that. Like I am good. I don't even know that I could dip below 15 because just like, I need a leadership team. I need, I need some infrastructure.
I need to be insulated. I just saw somebody buy a residential roofing business in like a couple markets away, but in the Southeast, and it's an independent sponsor deal. And they're like, we bought a leading residential and commercial roofer in the Carolinas. It's doing like $2.5 million in revenue.
Yeah.
Just, and like, hey, good. Like you probably are going to triple the size of that business and it's going to be great,
Yeah. Yeah. So my quick metric for like, are you getting a decent price? I personally don't care about multiples of earnings. So, people will turn over in their graves, I'm sure. I really care about weight against revenue. So if I'm paying more than a 50% of revenue, I'm like, do I like it that much? I've only ever paid 1 times for a business, and it's because like most of it was assets. They had a ton of really heavy assets. But like 50 to 60% is usually where I try to land.
And that's because it's kind of like, I don't care what you're doing below the like revenue
gross
and
margin.
COGS.
Yeah.
Like
it's irrelevant.
I know what I can do with it, so to speak.
Yeah. It's irrelevant. And, we really don't care. So like the things that we're looking at when we're looking at deals is like we ask for weird stuff. Like, hey, I don't really care what your EBITDA was. Like, it doesn't matter. Like you have a machine that produces X amount of revenue at X gross margin. Like that's the thing that I care about. So like how many phone calls do you get? How many GMBs do you have? How many reviews do you have? How many active accounts?
Google My Business.
Google My Business, yeah. How many active customer accounts? Like those are the drivers for us. So, okay, if you get 50 phone calls a day, I'm like, all right, yeah, I can do something. I can do something with this. If you get 3, I'm like, not really. Like I'm going to tap out on that. So yeah, most of ours is tied into that. But like how many people you have picking up the phone or like what you pay your bookkeeper, it just doesn't really matter. Even the managers, like it usually doesn't matter. Like we'll try to slide them over, but my tolerance for people doing things their own way inside my business is very low.
That's a sign of maturity. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm like, we're gonna play by my rules, or you can yeet. Yeah, but yeah, I think that just the game changes as you grow bigger and bigger. Where like the deal that we're looking at, again, it's. like nothing really matters other than revenue and gross margin. Like that's basically it. And then we just get to add those gross profit dollars into our machine.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. As we wrap up, this deal gets done, don't you think? Like somebody's buying this business transacts.
It is, it's kind of shocking the size of a business it takes to make a ripple on the market. And that size in plumbing and HVAC now is like $4.5 million. Yeah, it's not big. So, if a deal goes to market like near 5 million, you got eyeballs. You got a lot of eyeballs looking at that. Yeah. I mean, thousands of eyeballs looking at that deal, which is just kind of crazy. And if you go north of 10 or like 20, man,
you're crowded, really crowded.
Oh yeah. It's crazy because every deal you look at is $1 to $2 million. So the moment one is above that, you're like, whoa, okay, this is real. Yeah. So no, yeah, someone's going to buy it. Now what they buy it for, PE's appetite is real different this year, depending on, who that buyer is. They're looking for high quality, which some of the boxes here do get checked, no construction.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big one that nobody wants to touch right now.
John, this was good, man. I always learn something when we talk, and I love having you on the pod. So thanks for being our most.
I hope I keep getting invited back.
You do. The invoices in the mail. So
perfect.
Thanks everybody for tuning into another episode. If you enjoyed this, John's got a podcast too, owned and operated, that's really high quality, and we're big fans of his. And so check out our website, aquanon.com. We've got all the deals on there. They're all tagged and cataloged based on what you're looking for, and can be a helpful resource to you. But thanks, John, and thanks for everybody for sticking around.
Thanks for having me on.